Okay. Welcome to the 12th Annual New Hampshire Film Festival, everybody. It's been a great weekend so far. Hope you guys are going to enjoy some films, do some stuff. This here is another one of our awesome panels we got built for you this weekend. And we just want to thank not only our panelists, which you'll meet in a minute, but also some of our awesome sponsors that have put on this piece of the festival, Oport Properties, and our audiovisual team of Fuel Creative and AV Technik and Anchorline. And so without further ado, I just want to kick this one off. And on behalf of myself, Dan Hannon, one of the co-founders, organizers of the event, I just want to, again, thank you for being here. And you can see we're doing video. These will go up on YouTube immediately through social media. Then they'll be accessible through our own website. So please spread the word. And we appreciate that. I just want to introduce our moderator. This is Karlina Lyons, producer. And she's going to take it away and introduce our wonderful panelists. Karlina.
Thank you. Let me know if I'm not holding the mic close enough, because I'm not used to this. So thank you for coming to our panel, and thanks to the panelists for all coming together in a room today at my request. I was at another event, a New Hampshire Law and Entertainment event, and had a little panic once I realized how little I didn't know, and thought the way to solve that problem was to get all kinds of people who I couldn't pay to sit with me and give me advice, all in a room together so I can ask them questions. So if you don't have questions, don't worry, I do. So I guess we should just start by going down the line, and everyone could introduce themselves and say a couple words. Start with Kathryn.
I'm Katherine Dietz, and right now I'm the Executive Director of Filmmakers Collaborative, a nonprofit company in Boston area. But I'm also a filmmaker, and I had my own company for 23 years based in New York. It's called Ambrica Productions, and we made very high-budget films for PBS. And money dried up, and since then I started making very low-budget films that I didn't think were possible. And I'm so happy that Karlina called FC asking for somebody who had an experience with low budget, because I kept on thinking, someday I have to talk about low-budget filmmaking.
Marc Dole, I run Hatchling Studios and also do a lot of indie films, producer, director, editor, and the Portsmouth music documentary called In Danger of Being Discovered, which played yesterday, has been a pet project for the last couple of years, as well as a new project I'm working on with Aaron and Karlina called Only Daughter.
Hi, I'm Jessica Maher. I'm the freelance contracts administrator for the Boston local of SAG-AFTRA. Used to be Screen Actors Guild and AFTRA. We've since merged. Locally in New England, we have about 3,000 members. And I handle all the entertainment contracts, most of which that we do in Boston are the student, short, and ultra low, and I'm happy to talk about those today.
Hi, I'm Matthew Valentinus. I'm a Boston-based entertainment attorney. I originally had been on the inside working for independent distributors in New York and LA, and then for a studio. And then I returned to Boston to sort of start working with clients and sort of help steer them so they can get into those independent distributors and studios.
I'm Aaron Wiederspahn, and I have a film company called Either Or Films, and I'm a writer, director, and producer.
Great, thank you. And as Marc said, Marc and I just finished work on a low-budget feature called Only Daughter, so you will probably hear us reference that a lot, but we will try not to scare you too much.
But for good reason.
For good reasons, because it was a learning opportunity for all involved. I think I said this to all of you, that guerrilla filmmaking really chaps me, because it's a very romantic notion, and the technology has made it even more of a can-do notion. You can get a camera, you can go out and you can shoot your film. And that's a horrible idea. And so I think I wanted to start by talking about the fact that we can all agree that's a pretty bad idea, and the importance of pre-production and planning, which I think everybody underestimates the importance of that. So I know that's broad, but does anyone want to jump in with that? You're looking at me because I'm usually the one that's doing the pre-production. Yeah, yeah. So I'll tell you that it's very important, and it does pay off in the long run. And
I'll jump in. A lot of the calls I get, well, let me start off. I originally went to film school not to be an entertainment attorney. I wanted to be a director, like I think most kids that go to film school do. But through my internships and getting my first jobs and, you know, seeing kids win film school contests, you know, I was at NYU, and when people were there, people would spend $200,000 on their senior thesis movie just to get it into a film festival. And then even if you win, you get some agents calling you. And then I talked to them 6 months later, and they're $200,000 in debt. So I ended up working for distributors, and I turned out to be the guy who would screen and be the first person to buy your film. So I would be dealing with a lot of the independent producers who would be bringing us projects anywhere from 250,000 up to 3-4 million. And I would see what all their problems were. And what I came back to Boston for, because I'm a native and I also felt that there was a growing industry here, is to help sort of let people plan ahead. The main problem I'm seeing today, I mean, I get calls almost on a weekly basis from independent filmmakers, is that they're jumping in too quickly without figuring out how they're going to sell their film, who's going to buy their film, or they don't even have an idea of how much they're going to get paid for their film. But yet they're out there trying to raise $50, $100, $300, $400, $500,000, convincing people that this is money well spent in one of the worst economic times in our lives, and they don't even realize they're going to end up getting $200,000 back maybe. So I guess the main difference I found between professional and amateur filmmakers, it's not the money. You can make a great film for $50,000. It's just, what is your level of planning, and what are your goals in terms of how much you're expecting to make? That's what I'm trying to help people with, and I think that's why I was interested in coming to this panel.
Kathryn, do you have anything to add to that based on your documentary experience, which I know is a little bit different, but I think there's...
Yeah. Well, I think that you have to think about what's the most expensive part of making a film, and the elements are, well, one of them is definitely shooting, and you have to plan before you shoot. If you just go out and shoot and say, I'm going to just get some great interviews, like, you're not going to get great interviews, in my experience, if you haven't pre-interviewed, if you haven't really pre-interviewed everybody. I mean, the way I would work is I would go out and I would pre-interview everybody who might be in the film, and think about what they have to say, then think about what I want them to say, think about how it cuts with each other, you know, so what people do I want? So by the time I'm shooting, I might have pre-interviewed 30 people, but I've narrowed it down to 10, and I know who cuts with who. I know exactly what I want them to say, so that before I spend any money shooting, I've got it down to a script. And of course, I have to be spontaneous when I'm shooting, so that they say things that are great and unexpected. But I have them facing the right direction. I have the right, switching back and forth different focal lengths, and I know exactly how I'm going to use it. I know what kind of archival goes with it. And if I don't, sometimes someone will say something fabulous in a pre-interview and they won't say it during the interview. So you can kind of skirt around and get something else, because you're always going for those gems that pop out unexpectedly. I think that's what makes a film good, rather than just getting information from somebody. So that's like one area that you just have to do a ton of thinking about beforehand. Executive producer I had used to say that it's like if you're sewing something, you cut your fabric once, that's what you have to sew it with. When you make a film, it's what you've shot, that's what your film is, it's what you've shot. So make sure before you shoot that you know what you're getting. And I think with video, there's a tendency to overdo it. You have to think about that when you're shooting low budget, that if you have a lot of interviews, you have to get transcripts for everything. You have to make dupes of things. You have to digitize it. You've got to get yours, everything is going to cost more. So plan, plan, plan.
Good point. In the most recent film that we did with Only Daughter, it was very unique because from the outset, it was planned to be a low-budget film. So when Aaron was writing it, he was writing toward a budget, which is not a usual practice. Aaron, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, it's essentially, for me, and I guess, really like to the point of this panel, like making high quality films for low or no budget. To me, with modern technology and everything that's out there, is the bottom line first and foremost. Because you can plan all you want in the world and figure out your strategy and what you're going to do, et cetera, but it starts with story. Mm-hmm. It starts with story, and recognizing, you know, how to be able to tell a story well, or at least good enough. I mean, we're not talking about perfection, you know, and winning Academy Awards and different things, but like a good story that you know has an audience out there, and that there are people out there who will be receptive to this. And because the modern, you know, the majority of the public right now is used to watching, for instance, reality TV constantly. We see things that are totally handheld and all up in your face and verite, and it's unrefined, right, from a technical standpoint, right? So if you basically have good actors, and if you have a good story, then you can you know, make a way, and you can find something. And so like when we went in to do Only Daughter, which was really whatever, a crazy ambitious thing. I mean, I'm frazzled right now. We're like, I mean, we're literally like rendering pieces out of this and that and the other, and we got to hit this deadline tonight. But what I did when I approached them is I said, listen, okay, here we are. We live in New Hampshire right now. We don't have any money. We have, you know, just pennies, nickels, and dimes, which barely we had, nothing. And I said, well, I know, who do I know who's around here? Well, okay, I know Karlina, I know Marc, I know Lena, and I know Jonathan, you know, and I know this handful of actors. We don't have enough money to really pay actors anything worth it. So I found people, and I wrote specifically for them. I wrote for them, because a big mistake is somebody says, oh, here's my script and I planned all the world, but you don't have access to anybody who can pull off this sort of thing. So I found
Yes, you
people, well, yeah, I mean, you have some access, but I mean, you know, I did my first feature, and, you know, I've gone through the casting in LA and New York, et cetera, but you have a very, very limited access, you know, as far as like, if you're gonna really pull this off in a significant way. And so if it starts with story, and you look, and actors and actresses are the ones who convey your story, right? The public will forgive a lot of technical errors in the modern world. They'll forgive if the story's engaging and the performances are compelling. So if you write towards an actor's strength, you stay away from their weaknesses, et cetera, this is approach in low budget telling. So I found a group of people, 5 people, and I wrote toward them. And I workshopped with them. We hung out in a room, and I knew where they were weak and where they were strong, and tried to like best adjust to that in this instance, simply because we had no money, like
And
no.
the workshop was an amazing thing, because I think we only stopped like 3 takes because an actor didn't know a line.
Exactly.
That's great.
Yeah, I think for some reason, I know Marc and I had an aha moment when we realized, oh, right, rehearsals. Actors do that, and that makes them bad. Yeah, we should probably try and do that. So, but just because I know Jessica's sitting here from a SAG point of view, we went non-SAG, not for any SAG reasons. It happened that our pool of talent, who had already been cast, none of them were SAG actors, and we would have been happy to go SAG had we needed to. So, since we're on that topic, do you want to talk a little bit, Jessica, about the options for low-budget filmmakers? Because I have gone low, zero, no budget, and worked with Jessica with no issues. It is a little extra paperwork, and I'm the one who does the paperwork, so it's worth it. It should not deter you from going SAG because you don't want to do the paperwork.
I agree with what Karlina's saying, and I appreciate what you're saying, Erin. I think that that's a really novel way to approach your writing. And I jumped in just by saying that so that everyone here knows that you do have access to, if you want to use union talent, which I'm here to say that I think that those are the professional actors, those are the ones that have the most experience. The union has ways where you can sign either a short agreement or ultra low, which is our lowest of features, which is under $200,000 budget. And you can mix union members with non-union members. I can go into specifics, but I don't want to bore you with that maybe later. But the union over time has really found that our members want to do this work because the quality in the writing is there. It's local to where they live. It's people that they know, and it really gives them an opportunity to have that principal role that they might not get, maybe once every year in the feature films that roll around and the full budget, studio pictures that come around. So the unions crafted these low budget, what we call side letter agreements for independent producers. And if you're doing a short, you can hire SAG-AFTRA members, and you don't have to pay them anything. It really is just a paperwork process. If you're shooting a feature and you're under $200,000, it's $100 a day for people who are members. And I'm happy to talk about specifics later, but there are options, and don't let the paperwork be the thing that says, I don't want to do it.
It's really not that bad. And I think that sort of touches on another thing. Some of the time, even though we know we need to make certain adjustments to work in the low budget world, I think people sometimes shortchange themselves because there is talent out there that is interested in your project just because of the nature of the project. And I know both Marc and Aaron have gotten some higher level talent into projects. Do you guys have any comment on that? Because everyone always says, how did you get so and so in your whatever?
Well, no, as far as like the higher level talent, if you go through the traditional, like when I did my first, feature, we did, it was around, ended up being around like 1.2 million that we did the feature for. We got David Strathairn, he was just coming off his Oscar nomination, whatnot, and we had a relationship, and so we were able to go directly to him in that instance. So relationships obviously help, but otherwise then you do the traditional casting and you go out there and basically you have the money, you've got the budget, and so here's the deal. So you strike a deal. In a case of like, low budgets like 1 million, 2 million, more often than not you're working out favored nations deal. So everybody straight across the board is getting the same thing, and they're basically responding to the material. And so you send it and you hold auditions and they come in if they're interested, and you go through the whole process, and they want to do the material. But then when you book them, depending on whether it's a low budget or ultra low budget agreement, et cetera, my biggest battle, having been originally come from theater and whatnot, is that you don't have the rehearsal time, right? So you get them and then they show up on set and you've got them for whatever, 6 days, 7 days, or 5 days, or 3 days, and that's all you have them for, right? But they're there, they respond to the material, and you've got your contracts, and they get the paycheck. In the instance of no budget, and the reason that I took the approach of developing for them, the one thing that you can't do, like if I decided to go through a Boston casting, say I'm working out of Keene, New Hampshire, and we filmed the majority of the thing in Claremont, we're basically 2 hours away from Boston. So I could go into Boston, hold a casting, and I could find people that are just as good, but I wouldn't get time with them. And so when you're hedging your bets in this industry as well, they'd come in just for the shoot. So instead, I was like, well, we're in the middle of the woods. I've got to look around and just find somebody here. And because I found local people, it gave me 2 months with actors to just meet in my office and workshop and experiment. And those are the things that you can't get without money paying for it. So you have to, in order to make something for low budget, you have to think outside of the box in order to try to come up with that time to enhance the performance. Because the better the performance is, the more that's really selling the film. Along with everything else, that adds up. But if you start there, that's a good starting point. But by and large, again, it comes back to even my first statement. It's story. Whether it's name actors, whether it's local, they respond to the material. And it is great being in the low budget world because that nobody's there for the paycheck. And so if they are there, they're there because they think there's something in the story.
But how to attract the people is, I did a animated short like 8 years ago now called The Toll, and I went out after a lot of different voice actors to get them to be in this, and it was just too expensive and too tough to go through the agents. But what I started doing is making connections with people that were friends with this actor, or friends with that actor. And by the second animated short I did, Billy West, who's the voice of Ren and Stimpy and everything, and the Red M&M, and he's like one of the godfathers of voiceovers, voice talent, he told his manager that he wanted to work on our project because I went to his manager never passed on my name, but a friend of mine who had worked on another project with Billy took the script and the outline of the script to him on a personal level, and that's when he said, yes, I'm interested in that. And I did that all from New Hampshire. And then the other project with Justin McKinney was hosed, and how to go after the name talent was, all right, who else do you know in your circle of friends, and who do they know? And then to Aaron's point, write for them, and write so the role attracts them because they can see themselves in it already.
Yeah.
But it's still all the legwork of, hey, do you know so-and-so? And, hey, I know Mike O'Malley. Well, I mean, I shook his hand yesterday.
Out there.
But
yeah,
I mean, I might
exactly
be able
right.
to, float him a script tomorrow.
A float on. Well, and you always come back. The battle that you're up against is that you're always coming back to like the money thing, trying to figure out how do you get your thing made for no money, or how do you get your money. I've been in development on a project on paper it's great I'm going on like 3 years on this project called Someplace Like America, right? Been developing it for 3 years. As we sit here right now, the thing is like connected to source material from Pulitzer Prize winning journalists. Like Bruce Springsteen's connected with music. I have, Keith Carradine is attached as an actor right now. Robert Loggia, these people that Carrie Preston, who stars on True Blood, is on there. And there's a whole list of actors that who respond to the material. But you go out and you deal in the financing world. Well, guess what? Keith Carradine, we may all know who he is, and we know he's a credible actor. He's nominated for Tonys. He's a great guy. But guess what? No one's going to give you $2, $3, $4 million for Keith Carradine because he doesn't, as they say in the business, move the needle, or he doesn't. So you're like, wait a minute. We got this whole list of people who've been working like crazy, doing amazing things their whole life, who are credible, but they're not blockbuster status. And the margin, it practically takes George Clooney to finance even like a $3 to $4 million film now. So as an independent filmmaker, you're sitting there and it's getting lower and lower. And they say, no, once upon a time in Sundance's golden age, 2 to 3 million was the magic number. Now everything's below 500,000. Now every year you turn around, it's like 200,000, and it's crazy. And that's with a whole package and a whole team of people saying, we like this material. CAA is behind it, and they've covered it well. UTA is covering it well. They're doing this and that and the other. But so in the end, you're left stuck saying, how do I get this made? Right? And then that comes back to then all of a sudden you find yourself in the middle of the woods making a feature film for $20,000 freaking dollars with a bunch of actors from Keene, New Hampshire.
Right.
Because you're like, you just got to make something.
Because you just got to do it. Because you set aside the time, so.
Here's what, I just recently returned from a trip to LA, and here's how I think you can sort of get around that. Because first of all, like you said, you never want to talk to the agent. Because the agent's going to say, how much you paying me, who's producing it, what studio's distributing it, how much do you have to market it? And of course, you have no answers for any of that except some lies and some distant relationships. Right? So what you can do, first of all, no one reads anymore. No one reads anything. Everything is done visually now. It's all like a 5-minute pitch, okay, on a visual screen, and it's usually a trailer of some sort. So if you have $50,000 or $100,000 to make a movie, what I would do is I would take 20, 40, 50,000 of that and make an awesome 5-minute short of the movie. Maybe it's your best scene, maybe it shows your style, maybe it shows, whatever you're trying to stress. Maybe you can use that $15,000, $20,000 to get a really good actor to be in a 4 or 5-minute scene. Because realistically, that's all anyone's going to watch anyways when you're submitting it to all these places. Because the bottom line is, even if you make a $200,000 film, even if it can get into 50, 40 theaters around the country, they're still losing money on that. They're looking at numbers like, we need 20 million to get a film into enough theaters. Even if it's a $2 million film, you're asking a studio to spend $10, $20 million to market and distribute that movie, unless you're going straight to VOD, right? Because then that's an area that now you're open up. But with VOD, even I think it was a friend of mine just produced Arbitrage, which was a pretty good success. But even that, with pulling in all the favors, was like, $2 to $4 million budget, and that's probably the biggest success in recent times since Margin Call. And this was with professional producers who had real agents and could get to real actors. We're not talking about somebody on a semi-professional level somewhere else. So What you would be surprised what you can do, though, is you can get that agent to pick up the phone. If you can maybe go to say, hey, I've got $10,000, will you get, you know, maybe this director who's established and known, maybe he's a little older, or maybe he's had a couple bad films, but he's still big and he still means something overseas, because overseas money is more important than the U.S. money. And you can say, hey, I've got $100,000. I'll give you $10,000 just for this guy to say he's attached, and then he's going to show up at a couple financier meetings with me, and I'm going to raise some money with his name attached. The most important thing is to sort of separate your own self from the movie. See this movie more as like a business production, and try and take yourself out of it. And if that means giving up you as a producer or you as a director, you know, to get it made, then that's I think what you have to do. But you can package these films in like a 3 to 5 minute trailer, and they'll watch that. That's something, because you really have, that's it sometimes. Sometimes you get one shot where you've got someone big interested, and if you can't convince them in that time, or even if you get them on the phone and you're talking to them for 5 minutes, but you don't have the money, that's it. You're not going to get back to that guy for 6 months, 18 months.
True. Thank you. And I think that something both you and Aaron have said goes back to quality. You said you've had, you know, it goes back to story. It goes back to quality. You get the one chance. You might not get another chance. And it goes back to the conversation we were having over there earlier, that everybody can afford to make a film now, so everybody does, which always makes me suddenly feel like I'm a grandfather sitting a kid on my knee, but you need to learn your craft, boy, and you need to practice your whittling. And I think that's true. I don't think everybody needs to go to film school, but I think people need to learn their craft. And I think the technology makes it possible for people to do that, but it also makes it too easy for people, I think, to produce a film who don't know the craft. I'm not quite sure where my question's going with Mark, because now I'm going to turn that on its ear and ask, sort of like, what are the good... I'm assuming everybody will learn their craft, so I've already gone on that soapbox. But what are some ways in which technology has made it possible for people who already know their craft to produce their work? Because I know a lot of people here are either just starting out or haven't done a lot of films, so what their first projects might be, these low-budget projects, might be more calling cards or sort of proof of concept or learning experience. So how do people make these type of projects where they're not planning to sell it for $2 million or go to Sundance, but how do they make their first, get off on the right foot with these types of projects?
The best advice I ever got about making a film was after 4 years of film school, I bought a DVD or actually it was the time, Laserdisc, of El Mariachi. And the audio commentary from Robert Rodriguez says, keep making films because every director has at least 13 bad films in them.
Right.
And you might as well make those on VHS or 3/4 inch at the time. Don't waste the money on film. So he was trying to separate the cost of, you know, the film versus the video, and that was a huge thing 15, 20 years ago. And that is out of the way now for most cases. So now it's just going to keep making the films. Don't start trying to make a feature at first because you can. And, you know, we've talked about this many years because Karlina and I have worked together for many years. I mean, there was years that we would work on 7 short films in a year. And that was as much as making a feature. So why didn't we make a feature? Well, we would have learned a lot by making the feature, but I think we learned a lot more about making the shorts because we learned to make those shorts even better. And the first short that I had done that had any acclaim was The Toll, the animated film, and it was 7.5 minutes. And I started sending it out to different festivals, and nobody turned it down and said it's too long, but a couple of people said, you know, get your 1 minute credit roll out of there, and it will actually be easier for us to program. So I learned at a lot of festivals, if you just have a 10-second credit roll, it's then taking a minute of your film away. Therefore, they can plug another, maybe if 10 people do that in a block, they can fit another film in to their block and actually have more films. So, you know, looking into the different little ways that you can keep making it better. And even last night, watching In Danger being discovered, I audio taped it. I'm always audio taping it to hear the crowd's reaction to where I think things are funny or where I think people would react. And while I might never go back and re-edit the film, the next time I know, all right, this type of thing needs a more of a pause here, or I thought this was a great thing stylistically, but nobody took onto it except for my one buddy in Keene, New Hampshire that liked it or something like that, and tipped his hat to me. But nobody else enjoyed it or whatever. And I think it's keep working to make the mistakes on the little things. And I think one of the things I'm fortunate with is it's also my day job to do videos. So getting all these little stupid learning curve things out of the way really helps. And then when you have the technology, it's just about getting a bunch of other people that understand the technology around you. So getting multiple people with multiple personalities, multiple personalities with multiple talents. The multiple personalities happens anyways. Getting them around you so they understand, not that you're going to make them do every job, but your audio guy, if he understands what's going on with the lighting, and what's going on with the camera department, he's going to be much better off prepping so he's ready as soon as the director calls action, and he's going to have the right stuff ready. It's not, okay, let's set up the camera. Yeah, I think we should put lights here now. Now they can see through the camera, and that's on every set that I've gone to that is on the lower budget, more, less professional set. That there's a lot of great weekend warriors, and I'm a great weekend warrior when it comes to carpentry, that can do things, but they're just missing this one or two little steps to make everything that much better, and they need somebody from the outside to tell them, hey, if you did this, I'm pointing to Jonathan just because he knows he already does it, and I'm just giving him a shit. If you do this one thing, it's going to make it easier for the audio department to do this and the other department to do that. So, going into a set and going, all right, this is where we want to light. Let's get the camera set up, and you guys start setting up the light stands. That little difference right there, to be able to talk to your two different groups at one time and have their keys, their leads, know what a decent bit of, or have a good understanding of what you're trying to do, then they go off and both do their job at the same time, instead of, all right, the camera department's going off to do their job, and then you're just sitting back and waiting to tell the lighting guys what to do based on how the camera looks. It's having those people that can work together and at the same time, and that comes down to a lot of pre-production.
Right.
And also a lot of production management. I mean, having 4 or 6 producers on a film sounds like a lot, but we could have used more in the last one.
Right. This is true. Without getting too ridiculously technical, I think would it be helpful for people to hear sort of more detailed things about ways to improve quality on film set, like actual things we do in the production process, or that's helpful? Okay. So let's go through some of those things that we do. I mean, from a producer standpoint, Marc makes a really good point that, like, I don't intend to know everybody's job at all, but I think it's helpful if I know as much I can about what other people do on a set, and that's especially true in a low-budget film because you're interacting more directly and you're helping on a more hands-on way. So even though I'm clearly not a DP and I don't know anything about lenses, I know where they are. I know when you might want to change one and why. I know enough where my ignorance doesn't cause me to push this, Jonathan to move ahead more quickly. We're picking on Jonathan because he's
used to it.
He's used to it.
I think the most important person on a low-budget film is not the director or the producer or even the writer, okay? It's the line producer and a real line producer. Somebody who's actually really line produced the movie with a realistic budget and real software and has really set out a realistic, shooting schedule. Because too many times, I see some of these younger independent filmmakers come to me with these budgets that are just made up in their heads. And And then I'm like, well, do you even have a shot list? And, oh, yeah, we have a shot list. But they don't even know. I'm like, well, are you shooting 5 days a week? Are you shooting 6 days a week? Are you planning on shooting 7 days a week? Are you shooting 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day? And how often are you feeding people? And where are they going to the bathroom? Right? And that's why some of the most successful friends that I've moved up with from film school, everyone had a skill that no one became an instant director, but everyone had a skill, and usually they were the less glamorous skills, right? It was like the guy who was a really good assistant camera guy who's now the DP, or it was the kid who was working in the edit room logging edits and now is an editor but got editing jobs to stay in the industry. And the friends who were producers are the guys that were line producing and budgeting movies. They worked their way up from the production office. So they could actually sit down with a distributor and they can actually tell you how much it's going to cost to rent a generator on that day.
Right. I think that's true, and I would add to that the first AD role, because that's the person who keeps everything moving forward. Which kind of goes to the bigger idea of the team. And when you're forming a team in a low-budget film project, I feel it's different than forming in a larger project, because people are interacting so closely that you need to really know not just, okay, I'm going to pick on you again, that Jonathan is a great cameraman. I need to know, okay, and he's also gets along with these people, and he can handle the hustle and the bustle of things. Marc and I both produce together. He's more technical, so he's a good balance for my bossiness, things, the way that things sort of work out. The formation of the team is not just about skills in a low-budget project, and it's not even just about those things. It's also on who brings the good camera to the table, too, which, it's a balance. I was just thinking, because I love actors, and I wonder, what complaints do you get from actors about low-budget projects, or do you get those things?
Actors never complain.
I know that's not true.
It's the
Or I shouldn't say it that way. What things can someone on a low-budget film set do to make things more comfortable for actors who sometimes get a bad rap for being complaining, but they sometimes have a very good reason to?
The highest two complaints are, comfort and food.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, food's probably number one.
Yeah.
So I think that making the actors part of your team is probably the best way to go, whether it's bringing them in ahead of time, talking to them about their roles, doing rehearsals, seeing that the project is just as much theirs as it is yours. They want to be part of it. They want to see it succeed. Some of them obviously are more flexible and don't mind that they're sitting in a cow pasture for 10 hours. Others want ice cream every day. But I think that in the casting process, you can get a sense of their personalities and see if it meshes with yours. And certainly, organization is the number one key to success for both the film team and the actors.
That makes sense, and it just shows you're showing them respect, not just as, and I don't mean this as literally as it's going to sound, but they're not just another piece of equipment on the set, which I think when things get rushed, we all get into that mindset with each other and with actors and everything, and I think Aaron was very good about keeping us in check on that.
Well, I was going to say something about, speaking just helping with, making life better on a set or making life the best that it possibly can be, is realistic expectations, right? Being pragmatic. Like, you have to understand and I'm speaking strictly I'm not speaking about a short or commercials or music videos. Those are all separate entities. I'm speaking to like the feature film realm, all right? It's hard, no matter what. If you have $100 million or if you have nothing, it's really, really difficult. And if you do your research and you've studied and you've learned and you know everything that's involved, then when you set your foot onto that set, you're prepared. because you know that you are going all out, balls to the wall, nonstop from like day one until it's finished. And so many people have these glamorous ideas of, oh, filmmaking, and you're a producer, you're a director, half my community in Keene thinks I'm like rich. They're like, oh, he's down there, oh, because that guy makes movies. It's like, what, are you kidding me? It's like, I don't have jack. They've got this glamorous notion, and it's really hard, and it's a very, very blue collar sort of existence. You get on a set and you grind it out. And then when all of a sudden people get in there and realize, holy smokes, the hours are like crazy, they're like running all over the place, that's when things break down and fall apart. So if your expectations are realistic, then you can get through it, and you have to work together as a team, and you have to understand that everybody has a vital contribution to making this thing come to life. Auteur theory or whatnot, that it's just the director's game. And I say this as a director. It's like, it's ridiculous, because it's not. There's no director that can just stand up and be like, there you go, I did it. It's my movie. Are you kidding me? He didn't do it without his first AD, without his DP, without his editor, without his, the gaffer, his script supervisor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, ad infinitum. This list of people. And so communication has to be open, and you have to be able to even share moments of frustrations, but don't like beat the hell out of somebody, which is common in this industry, to just like make people feel like shit, because they're just out there with this dictatorial regime, because it's such big money, and everybody's like under this pressure because they're chasing the dollar to like have the big hit and the whole plan, that they just like, they lose their humanity. And they dehumanize one another. And it's so easy to get caught up in that when you're on there and you're like, go, go, go. But if you come in and you're just realistic, you're pragmatic, and if you can talk, then you can get through things. And at the end of it, Terrence Malick's like one of my like icons, one of my favorite directors. And I love, he always says, at the end of a film shoot, he's like, there's just a long line of disgruntled people, and all you can hope is that you're not one of them. And the thing is to try to like work the best to where if your communication's open, you can work through this as you go, and realizing that, especially in low budget instances, people are wearing 3 or 4 hats. If all of a sudden we sit here in our set and it's like, hey, Karlina, you're a producer. Okay, now you're also going to be our first AD, and you're also going to be our line producer, and you're also going to, and boom, 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 boom. It's like, it's crazy to just wear one hat in this industry.
And I think it required, I think the only reason it worked is because Aaron was able to be flexible, and everybody on the team had flexibility in them. And that is a compliment, but it's also just a statement about some people are not prepared to be able to be as flexible as this kind of filmmaking requires. They have a vision, and it is that picture on the wall, and if I can't find you a lighthouse, Aaron, are you going to be able to live with that? Or do we scrap the movie, and having flexibility, and at sometimes, several members, keys of the team coming together and saying, this is what we want, what do we have around us? Yeah. So.
And also, yeah. I did find out that if you include strippers in your movie, it's amazing. It keeps the morale up. And you've never seen extras be so still.
Oh, they were great.
As when they sit at a stage in a strip.
It was amazing planning to have that strip club scene in the middle of the shoot.
Yeah.
So just as you were starting to get down, oh, hey, okay.
Yeah.
That also goes to the rest of the planning of the film, because the first
I
4
scheduled it that way
days-
intentionally, Phil.
The first 4 days were 1 or 2 locations for 10, 12 hours. And then the last couple of days were 10 locations for 14 hours.
Mm-hmm.
If those last couple of days were the first couple of days of shooting, it wouldn't have mattered to anything, because everybody was available every day and all that stuff. But just the mentality of going in and shooting a bunch of stuff all of a sudden really would have brought the mood down for the whole film. But what you had is 17, whatever, plus 30 people, whatever we had. You had a bunch of people that were on, it was hard work, and you're watching everything happen, and you're getting a lot of stuff done, and then you're getting really involved. And then when the days got harder, you knew how good everything else was coming out. So you were just pumped up more and pumped up more.
Right.
And I think that's really what helped drive everything.
Yeah, and I think there's that silly part of being a producer, the whole cheerleader aspect of it, which I get ridiculous and silly about, but I think it's a really important part of my job. And if it means on day 6, I bring out those hidden Tootsie Roll Pops, and morale went through the roof, or I have to do some little dance interpretation to get the team back on having a good time, I'm willing to do what I have to do. But anyway, back to working with the community, since we brought up the strippers. Because, in a low-budget film, you're not generally going to studio stages and building things. You're working in the town. And especially for New Hampshire filmmakers, where we live here and there aren't a lot of films here, so I feel like we need to be extremely careful with teaching with people with respect. And I know that, Kathryn, you must have worked pretty closely with the town of Needham? Mm-hmm. When you were, how was your, that was a documentary, so I know it's a little different, but I know you also partnered with the town office, or how was that as a filmmaker working with a town, that kind of a partnership?
It was an antagonistic relationship.
Ah.
So no, that wouldn't be instructive here.
Okay.
No, it's funny. The town thought that what my situation in the very low budget film was that the town was celebrating its 300th anniversary, and someone had the big idea to make a film, but they didn't know how to make a film. And by film, I mean a documentary about 300 years of history. And I had been thinking, because there's so much publicity around the tercentennial, that I thought I should do something. And I ran into a woman who we were walking our dogs together, and she said, "You should sign up to do work on the film." So I thought, well, maybe I'll advise like an executive producer or something. And I went in and I talked to the guy who was at the Needham Channel, public access cable, which I've come from the very snobby PBS world that thinks public access cable is not something to even talk about. And it turned out that Needham has some really, really good stories. Go back to It's All About Story. Like I wish that I had the film here, but I didn't get it I didn't apply to the festival in time. But the film is actually really a great story, I think. And so I thought, well, let me help you shape it a little bit. And that's how it happened. And I said, but it can't be done for free. It could be done for like a little, but it can't be done for free, because no matter what, we'd have to pay for a really good composer, because that's going to tie it all together. Going to pay for a narrator that's going to help it. Going to pay for like someone to do the maps and graphics. And I was going to do it for a really low budget for them, but they'd have to pay some from me. And altogether, the budget was $65,000 for a little over an hour film that's been on GBH, now PBS. And they thought that was the biggest budget in the world, and that they did not want to release it. And at the last minute, there was a problem because they had a tent for the finale of the tercentennial year, which was free. But no, it's not. Setting it up and taking it down costs $40,000. Where you think they're going to find the $40,000? Well, that film can't possibly need that much money. And so they took it out of our budget. So it was not a good relationship. But what was good was that you could go, when you have a local story, you can go to local businesses and you can say, hey, this is actually going to be good for you, and we can screen it at your place, and it's going to bring people to town, and they'll go to your restaurant. And so within 1 week, I had gained that money back again. Didn't take a lot. It's just that the town still feels that it's like a massively expensive undertaking. Why did we do this? Although they also love it.
Yes.
Maybe a question about filming in towns. What about in public places where you're trying to not get too many people kind of spilling into the background, but you want a natural look? What's the legal boundaries kind of to what you can and can't catch, or how big or small you can be before it gets on some radar where you need some kind of licensing?
Yeah.
Sure, it depends on the place, but what few tips about that?
Yeah. I mean, we were supposed to not film on anyone's lawn, so when there was a scene about the tear-downs and the McMansions going up, we couldn't stand on their lawn and get the angles unless we went up and talked to them and asked them. And when we had a scene about kids, and kids are constantly overscheduled and into sports, we shot lots of feet of kids playing soccer, just because if we did get the faces, we would have had to ask for permissions. It depends on the audience for it.
Right. And just with narratives, I make anyone who I can see sign, because it's not easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. It's not. Yes.
Yeah, so if I'm like shooting not a film, but just shooting film, and I put it on YouTube with no intention of financial gain, what type of permission do I have? Like if I'm standing on a public sidewalk, interviewing people walking by, I verbal consent, or do I need written consent to put it out there on the internet?
It's a legal question here.
Do you have that one?
I'd say the short answer in that situation is because it's a public space and no financial money, then you're probably okay. But
But if I do make money off of that, because if, like, they do hit, if, like, I get enough hits and I end up making money off of that, will they be able to come back to me and say, like, hey, you made money off of this, you used my image?
it depends how you shot them. If you shot them unknowingly, like if they were aware of you shooting them,
Okay.
that would help.
But
But
if they consented to, like, do a quick interview on the street, and I just threw it out on YouTube, and they were like, you know what I mean? Like, could they come back to me and say, hey, you used my image, you made money off of it, even though I didn't exactly intend to?
yes, they technically could come after you in that situation.
You
if
should
did
always
make
get
money.
releases.
Yeah.
Always
Yeah.
get releases, and if you're in a public place, you can put a sign out that says, people need to know that they're being filmed. So you have to say,
Would a verbal consent work? Like, if
You
I
should
said,
get
"Hey,
a
can I
written
use your
consent."
consent?"
No,
And
you
if they were
should-
to do it on film, could I use that, like, to cover me? Or do I have to?
if they were to okay it on film, like if,
Say, like, hey, can I use your image, whatever, and if they were to say, yes, you can use my image, could I use that as a legal defense? Or do they have to actually, like, sign a paper that says it's okay?
written consent is always better, but if you got it on film, I think
Yeah.
that would be probably okay.
Yeah, and it's also good just because you might want to have contact with these people later on. So getting a release form is also a way to get their contact information. Yeah, in my humble opinion. Any questions?
I had a question. Going back to Matthew, what you were talking about the line producer. If you got a brutally honest line producer and they're coming in with your project at 500,000, you were wanting it to be more like 100,000. Where do you start making compromises?
Locations and exteriors. Try and shoot everything on one stage. That would probably, locations are probably the biggest way to save money. And just cutting out, you can always rewrite a scene. Sometimes it, like when they were talking about, how to adjust on a film set, I think, I've worked inside production companies, film companies where the locations, a shooting script is so different from a script that might get bought and go into production. Because then the shooting script changes, obviously, once you lock down locations. And then sometimes you have to change things entirely. So I would say locations are probably the cheapest way to do it. Or special effects, or even using archival footage, footage that already exists. Those would probably be the three ways I would think of saving money.
Or shorten your time frame.
Yeah,
Right.
shorten your
Yeah.
production days by shortening the amount of locations, crew moves, everything like that. And if it's a narrative thing, getting the rehearsal stuff down. So instead of shooting, Jonathan and I worked on a film. We worked on a film for 5 days of pickups. I don't know how many minutes we ended up shooting, but it was a feature film. We did 5 days of pickups with a crew the same size as what we used on Only Daughter. When we shot 10 days and made a feature, we shot 5 days and shot about 5 or 10 minutes of pickup stuff because there was no AD on that film. And I think the original principal photography was 60 days because there was no AD. They had a line producer that never came to set. There was no AD to really structure everything going around and saying, no, we need to stop, no 15th take, go on. And another thing is a second camera. So a second camera that is getting a complementary angle that you were going to go shoot anyways, but the rental of a second camera can be $500 to $2,000 a day, and that could save you maybe 4 hours because you don't have to then cut and let's do this other angle, let's do this other angle. And
Second cameras are a mixed blessing, though.
right.
It can be more trouble than that work.
But it's one way to help drop the budget. With one of the scenes in Hosed, we pulled out 3 cameras just because we knew it was also an improv thing. We knew there was going to be no way that we could cover all of this within the 10 hours that we had to shoot. so we brought out the extra cameras.
And there's
Also
oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, the number of people in a scene is important. You know, if you say you have a scene that maybe, you know, it's at a stadium or it's at a, you know, requires a large audience, just cut that scene out. You know, if you can try and get as many scenes, the most successful independent films in terms of profit generally have casts in like the 4 to 6 range. Those are the most successful films. So if you can just shoot a scene with 2 to 4 people in it, rather than having large scenes or big background stuff going on, that'll save you a lot of money.
Yeah. And also, too, you know, there's, I mean, in your hypothetical of taking a $500,000 budget and cutting it down to $100,000, there are like so many variables involved there that you'd have to, you know, to get into that budget and to scrutinize it, you know, depends on like what are the day rates that you're negotiating. I mean, one of the things you'll learn, you know, very early on from a line producer perspective, and it's the hard part of producing and line producing, is that everybody on a film set and every department head wants as much as they can possibly get, right? So your DP is gonna, you know, your DP and your director will have conversations that we want this, and the DP is gonna come and he's gonna try to get as much as he can in the lighting department and as much as he can, and your art department is gonna come and they're gonna try to get as much as they can. And so you always have to come back to like to the producers and the director ultimately in questions regarding like, well, you know, what is absolutely imperative, you know, and what isn't imperative. And if what remains imperative is something that's keeping the budget inflated beyond what you wanted, then obviously you have to do, you know, something radical to your, you know, your locations, or whether it's, you know, cast size, but, you know, day rates, the amount of people that are on, the amount of days that you shoot, a complete rewrite of scripts, you know, all that. Because you know, budgets are constantly a fluid entity. Through the entire time, once you get there, I mean, they change and shift and evolve, you know, constantly. And, you know, in a typical, not on low budget productions, you don't, real low budget productions, you don't necessarily have all the like liberties of this, but typically, you know, every day, you know, your departments are turning in expense reports. So you're constantly being able to say, oh, well, we had a budget of $1,000 here for props right here, and they turned it in at $650. So now we got, you know, 350 more, you know, and we can move it over here and shift. And so it's a very, you know, I mean, I agree with him, as he said, you know, line producer is very, very important, and it's such a fluid thing, and to be able to think on your feet where to shift what, you know, and to call the necessary parties involved right away to make those adjustments and adaptations to be flexible. And like locations, for instance, he says, I'll bring that up. That isn't as big an issue in New Hampshire. I'll tout one for the state of New Hampshire and the state film office, but it's different here because we don't have filming permits are not required. You deal with locations on a basis, you know, individual basis. So like we did our whole feature, we didn't have to pay for any locations. We used 25 locations, and that was just working out individual things. So we're fortunate here. Other states, you know, it's different because then that becomes way bigger. Like if you're in Massachusetts or something on a location basis.
Right, and it is a very, oh, sorry, I just finished coming in. It is a very fluid thing, and I think that a lot of, it's not strife that's created, but lack of complete understanding, because the crew doesn't know that, okay, if I take the money from him, it's not coming from a magic pie in the sky. You know, if I'm taking from him, it's going to you. So it's literally coming out of, you know, this part of the film. But the other thing to keep in mind, which I'm always learning, is some of the time ways that seem like they will save money don't save money in the end. You know, I should have rented the gear van. I
didn't say a word.
I know, but we all were thinking it. They were thinking it, and they weren't even on the film. So, you know, it was just, I didn't get a gear van because it was an extra $500. We caused $600 worth of damage because up to gear because it couldn't be properly stowed. I learned my lesson. I won't do that again. But yeah, so it's definitely squeezing here and things pop out there. But I'm sorry, Matt just had a question first.
I just wanted to tack on the filmmakers that I regularly deal with at the film office. I would say 80% of them are very professional, up and up. There are those filmmakers out there, low-budget filmmakers, who just can't get out of their own way. And one of the biggest stumbling blocks I find is insurance.
Yeah.
And whenever I bring it up, seems to be the roadblock.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, oh, it's not about filmmaking anymore. It's something serious. And I
Yeah.
think about insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Can any of the panelists talk about what low-budget filmmakers should be looking at as far as getting insurance, how big, how much that costs? Do I do it for just a project? Do I do it something annually? Because that'll either, do things the right way as far as not helping them get locations or shut them down completely.
Yeah. Well, I'll just speak real quickly to that because it's a great point about insurance. Like even in our case, like we did, this was a no budget, and when we went in and we're like, okay, we're at no budget, even if we can't pay a dime anywhere, our first priority was
insurance.
We will have insurance.
I won't work on that project without insurance.
Yeah. So it's like we had to have insurance. So that's absolutely imperative. And whether to have it over the long haul or individual, typically it's an individual basis. Like for instance, I have a company, Either Or Films, which is an LLC and it's my own company, but then the individual projects will come through. So like, for instance, Only Daughter is not, Either Or Films is like a production company producing entity that can, sit in a managerial sort of position, if you will. But Only Daughter is its own LLC. So it's Only Daughter LLC. Or if I did Sensation Side, it's an LLC, someplace like America. They all exist in their own thing. So when you create the individual project, then you're insuring the project. And the reason for doing that primarily is what it does is it preserves the company. So if you got a company that may be involved in several projects, basically, one project may not do well financially at all, another one may bust, et cetera, but because they all have their own legal entities and they're all insured in their own individual way, then anything that comes down, it doesn't come back on the company head, it comes down on that specific project.
Yeah, Matthew,
Well,
do you have
another
it? Oh,
thing
sorry.
with insurance was another film I worked on over the summer. We had production insurance, $500, $600, $800, whatever it was, rental insurance. And then a $1,500 monitor got wet with the salt air and shorted out, and that was borrowed from somebody. Now I have a friend that owes his friend $5,000 because you can't get that monitor anymore. And the production company, since the monitor wasn't on the rental list, the production company is not backing that. So now all of a sudden, a friend that got paid $2,000 to work on a film, borrowed a monitor, is now out $5,000. So insurance for the equipment, and you can't rent good equipment without insurance. Not that you need all the best stuff to do films, to do a good film anyways, or one of those 13 bad films that you got to do. But it also, just the people. If somebody gets hurt on your set, oh my goodness, you could lose your house because of that. So insurance is huge, and that's definitely got to be the first $800 in your budget.
Yeah,
This is
absolutely.
good.
And people will ask you for it. We don't need permits, but people will ask you for the certificate of insurance for the location. And if you've just brought a film crew to film there and you don't have that, it's your fault. And so you have to make another plan. I wanted to see if Matthew had anything else to add about LLCs, because we all form LLCs for each project we're on, because we know we're supposed to, and it gives us a little bit of protection personally from litigation. And are there any more details we should be knowing or myths that people believe they're more protected than they are?
Well, the myths are, if you form an LLC, but you're functioning out of your own bank account, and, you'd say it's like a $20,000, $30,000 film, but let's say you have a successful side business and something goes wrong and you're liable, they'll puncture that LLC. So you need to separate your money as well. You can't, you got to open up a separate bank account just for your money. That would probably be the most important thing. You should have insurance for it. You should definitely keep separate books for it. And you definitely should get an LLC, but don't do it until you're really ready to do it. Don't do it until you have your budget and you're really ready to shoot and you're ready to start paying people and you're ready to start signing contracts. And all your contracts should flow through that U.S. LLC. And all the assets of the film should go through that LLC. And all that, just in terms of music, everything, because whoever you're going to license the film to, you want to put it in a format where they can actually acquire it when they want to buy it from you. They don't want to have to track it down. They'll want a chain of title, you know, so you want to be able to sign the copyright of the script. You want to be able to show that you have the rights to all the music in there. You want to be able to show that, you know, you are who you say you are, and you're indemnifying everybody in there. So when you pass along the film, no one's going to chase anyone else down, because that's a problem I think a lot of independent film producers do, especially, and in the LLC it should define who are the producers. A lot of times, you know, somebody might own the copyright and they're good friends and they both think, you know, they have an oral agreement. I hear oral agreement all the time. Oral agreements are useless. Have an operating statement, you know, defined in the LLC saying who's what, who owns what, you know, I mean, or a partnership if you're going partnership, but just have everything down on paper.
What are some other legal mistakes that people make, especially because I know you deal with distribution? What are common mistakes that people do that really fouls up distribution? Oh, I'm sorry, sure.
Leads into that,
Yeah.
but it kicks off of that. Worked on a film a few years ago that we had a distributor very interested in, and it was a film that played here and everything, but the distributor there were no SAG contracts done by the producer, and there were no location releases. And one of the locations we used doubled for not a famous building, but a building of note. And the distributor backed out away from the film because we couldn't show that this house in Dover, New Hampshire is actually owned by this guy, not owned by this big museum in Massachusetts. So we lost the distribution because we didn't have all that.
Right, and another simple thing that you can do to really avoid problems is get your script cleared. Because you never know what's said in the script or what's in the background of the script, or maybe there's, you know, like property in the script, or if like say for instance a Ford Mustang is a big part of your script. There's sort of a fine line where that becomes, okay, do we need to talk to Ford about that? Is the script that important? I mean, is the Mustang, you know, will Ford, like let's say there's a Ford Mustang that goes around running over 4-year-old kids, and that's the movie. Ford might not like that. So you need to get the script cleared in a way like that, you know.
And switch to
They,
Chevy.
do
Right.
most people? I'm just curious, because this is a common thing, like the things you don't learn in film school, sort of things that only going through the process will teach you. But you know, as he's referring to getting a script cleared, are most people familiar with a clearance report? Like before your film gets shown out there, there's a report, and you will hire a company and you'll pay, and they will do. I recommend that if you want recommendations, there's one called IndieClear. That's a basic, like, small company, but you have to pay. And ultimately, before your film is shown to the world, it has to go through a clearance report. So if my main character's name is Don Cowley, like, a clearance report will go through every component of, like, okay, well, there's a Don Cowley who actually lives in Claremont, New Hampshire, or wherever where you filmed it, and her story bears a resemblance to this and that and the other, and they flag all these things. Or, like, you know, the big issues with, like, big corporate, you know, companies, if you like, Rodin, Ford, or, you know, Pepsi, or all these sorts of things, you've got to go through the entire script, and they notify you of all the flag. So all of a sudden, if it became an issue, then you've made the movie, and all of a sudden her name is Don Cowley, and you're like, ooh, and they'll give recommendations where it's like, well, we can't really do this. Then maybe all of a sudden you got to go into, anytime somebody says Don Cowley, it's like, well, we're going to have to change that. Now you may have to all of a sudden do some ADR work, where it's like everyone's going to call her Don Crowley, you know, and you're like changing these things because there isn't a Don Crowley, but the Cowley is too similar. I mean, there's just all these details, and they don't teach you those things in film school, but you don't find out until you're ready to put it out into the world, and you receive that list of deliverables, which are the biggest, like, most haunting sort of things that, like, overwhelm our filmmaking existence. Is just like, you want me to do, wait, what is that? What the hell is that? I went to film school. What the hell is that? And it's and so you really need to be thorough in that regard.
And there's a really great book out that I'll recommend. This will be my recommendation. John Garren's book. What's the title of the book? Actual title?
Independent filmmakers business.
The Independent Filmmakers Handbook on Legal and Business. Yeah. Yep. If you Google John, Jongaron. Yep, Garon. He is a lawyer who I think a lot of us have had the pleasure of working with, and he's written this really great book. It's not a substitute for legal advice by any means, but it at least will get you familiar with the terminology and things. So when people bring up things like clearance reports and E&O insurance, all this junk that we throw around. Yeah, go ahead, Van. And it will scare the crap out of you. It's a fascinating read. Have a bourbon when you're reading it. Sorry.
Along these lines, I was wondering if filmmakers on the panel had suggestions for resources for low cost or public domain music, footage.
Recommendations for low cost or public domain. Well, I'm a huge music lover, so music's like imperative to me. Like whenever I go into a film, and I usually write from it, and I recommend. I don't ever really go into the public domain realm. I mean, there's tons of stuff there, and I'm sure someone here can speak to that. But in terms of music in general, I find that the friends and family approach is the best because, and it depends on relationships as well. I mean, if you know a lot of people in the music industry, you can find tons of stuff because that's something that can really hang you up big time.
And it's creating a mutually beneficial thing for the both of you.
Right.
They're getting something out of it, and you're getting something out of it. And anytime you can form a partnership like that, that's the best.
But you have to work out your deal
with
them in advance because it's the biggest thing, and not just like you think. I mean, sometimes you can pay them a blanket, but more often than not, what you end up doing is working out a step deal sort of situation. So you'll try to negotiate free festival use rights, and then you'll be like, okay, so you get a $5,000 bump if the film is acquired for theatrical. Then you get another $5,000 bump if it's picked up for VOD, or then you can get another $5,000 bump if it goes to international and cable or whatnot. And then you try to put a cap on it. The thing with negotiating your film rights before you go is you want to put a cap, a very reasonable low cap on that. Or if your music isn't huge, a big mistake that some people do would be like, I made my movie, check it out, the music's awesome. And it's like, here's a Springsteen song, and I got this Madonna track that's in the background, and here's the Beatles. It's like, awesome. You're never going to get that, because it's going to cost millions. But you can, if it's really, really low, you can just get the festival use rights. This isn't recommended all the time, but it just depends on what you have planned or prepared. But you can get just the festival use, have your music in there where it's low and cost effective, right? To where it's not going to cost much. And you can sometimes get a company to cover the deliverables aspect of that, to recognize here we haven't finished the deal, they can negotiate it. And if they don't get the kind of deal that they want, then you can offer a replacement, right? You can get something in there that will cost them nothing. But more often than not, you want the deals in place primarily just because then a lot of times all of a sudden you have a friend who's like, yeah, I'll do the movie, $500, man, here's my song. And you don't put it on paper, then all of a sudden they're like, oh, you're going to Sundance, and you get picked up by Sony Picture Classics, and now all of a sudden it's like, well, I just picked up a new attorney, and he thought maybe we should get this stuff in writing, and now all of a sudden they're like, well, it got picked up, we want 5,000 as opposed to 500, and it's just imperative, and there's been countless numbers of film after film after film that's just like, do you realize that your song selection would cost you, double what the budget of your film actually was?
There is a place that you can go called OPT Music, Off the Beaten Tracks it stands for. The guy Tom Phillips does really great soundtracks for documentary anyhow. I think he does for features as well. But he's created a library of that stuff that he sells for very good prices. And you can buy it cheaper when you buy sample music rather than composed. So if you don't have to have your musicians come in and then pay the P&W and all that for your musicians, it saves a lot of money.
Yeah, I was going to say the festival use thing is very smart because, for instance, I had a client who got a Mighty Mighty Boss Tone song for $500. Now, if it hits the festivals and it's great, it's going to cost us a little more, but we're taking that gamble. So you can get a pretty cool song, for $500,000, $1,500, if you just festival use and you're not making money off it. But then they'll get you once if you do sell it. You'll have to pay a considerable amount.
Step-ups.
And I had another friend who did a documentary for $50,000, and he got some bad legal advice, and there were some Nat King Cole songs in there. And this was just a cool documentary. You know, he runs a successful production company, and he just wanted to make his money back. We had, you know, we were able to negotiate it down, but we had to end up paying another $20,000 for 2 songs and a $50,000 documentary. So music is insanely expensive, and my best advice would be get a kid from Berkeley and do an original, something original. It's the cheapest, and that's the scariest. That's the first thing all the distributors look at is music, because they know it's the biggest litigation problem. It's a huge litigation problem. So just avoid it and just get original music.
I just talked to a buddy of mine. We've got a couple of his songs in our most recent film, and he's in a band that none of you would know, none of you heard of, and he lives in New York City, and I had a couple songs that I was going to use, and one off of his most recent album. Now, his most recent album, he owns outright, and he's in this position where he's like doing his own thing and got his ownership. I had another song that is from a previous album that was, has different publisher, and it was different record label, et cetera, and to go through that would end up costing more, et cetera, because this guy, even in a band that nobody knew, he's like, oh yeah, I had a song placed last year, I made, I 15 grand, off of a Jersey Shore placement, right? And nothing, and so he goes, listen, he goes, if you want to make it easier, he goes, I mean, I'll talk to the publisher off the old record, and he goes, we can make it easy. He goes, but if you can just find another replacement track off of my new record, then you can just go directly through me, and we'll settle that, because otherwise, because the publishers, they know that, they can make money off that. I mean, because music is always imperative, and the easiest way for musicians who none of us even know who are struggling is to get placement in films,
Well, just a question about that. Would there be a legal issue? Let's say you've got a band puts out a demo album, they get picked up, but before that happened, you negotiated with the band, they were good friends of yours, you got it in writing, I'm going to use track 2, but that whole catalog of music gets put under Warner Chappell or something. Do they have that right to now?
Not if you have a contract in place before
So they can't
the
say
deal.
that
Yeah.
It doesn't exist in
No.
our eyes.
No.
To be able to,
If your contract's in place, then you're fine.
Yeah, and soundtrack rights are different than, just being able to synchronization rights, right? So a lot of times, if you're just saying, I'm just going to use it in the film, we're not, they'll be okay with that, because then they'll still be able to make the money on the soundtrack rights if it's a great song, and their publishers will handle that. So you can just get what's called synchronization rights, which means you can just use it in the films and the videos and the trailers and things like that. And then sometimes that's cheaper. We just did that for like another documentary I'm doing. We have the composer's probably the most famous person in the documentary, but he gets $40,000, $50,000 a film. So but his music is so good and so important to the documentary. We said, okay, you can keep the soundtrack rights, and if we make a certain amount, and then we were able to get him cheaper.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing some specific fundraising strategies, pitching people you know versus pitching people you don't know versus putting in your own money versus this new thing, which is crowdfunding. I know there was a seminar on that. I think it might have happened already. But it wasn't able to make, but just, how people have gotten their money and what they would recommend and not recommend, and if there's any websites called "We'll give you as much money as you want to movie.com."
No shortcuts.
Yeah.
There really aren't shortcuts out there. That's like, I think that someone said that you're always in development. I think that being a filmmaker means you're spending most of your time trying to get your money.
Yeah. And if
Yeah,
you
and I got some good advice years ago about which way do I go? Do I go with finding a fiscal sponsor for a project so this documentary can get made and people can donate their money to this nonprofit, then they take 5% and I keep the rest of the money, or go to investors, or go to crowdsource? And the person looked at me and goes, well, what does your address book look like? So my address book at the time looked more like, all right, people my age with about my income, and all right, I'm not going to be able to go after them for any big money, so crowdsource stuff goes on in the project. So Another project was, okay, this was about my daughter's disabilities, and there were some nonprofits that we could go to. So every project is different, and it's still always about, well, who do you know, and who do they know?
Right. And something in the documentary world, which I'm starting to get the hang of, is the idea of step fundraising. You know, you raise the money for the first cut, and then you don't have to raise all of it up front, which I know is scary.
It
But
depends.
a lot of
If
the
you
time
get money
do
from
it,
the
though.
National Endowment for the
Yeah, that's
Humanities, they
different.
won't release it until
Yeah.
you prove that you have it all, or if you guarantee the shortfall.
Right.
And also, I am probably well, there's two different things, because you mentioned the crowdfunding and versus traditional you got to have all your paperwork in place first off. So if you're gonna raise money, so you're asking people to give you money for your project, you typically have to have, in that case, you'd have to have a private placement memorandum in place, a PPM, which is a huge document, is large, that basically tells everybody why they're out of their mind for investing in a film. And what PPMs do as well is they acknowledge and separate the difference between accredited and non-accredited investors, which for some crazy reason, basically what the government or the law will say is that so if I come at you and I say, I'm trying to sell shares, I'm selling X amount of shares, I'm trying to raise $1 million, and you can buy them for $25,000 a share, et cetera, but you can only be an accredited investor, all right? Or if you're non-accredited, and here's the difference, accredited, like you have I believe it's like over $1 million worth in terms of your income, your assets, your whatever, $1 million, $2 million, something like that. And so so then the government or the legalities says, well, since that person has X amount of worth, they clearly understand what money is, right? They understand what money is and can give. If you don't have that worth, then the legalities or the governments and the powers that be say basically you don't have it to lose, and so you might not necessarily recognize what you're getting into. So therefore, if you want to invest in this, you need to have the signature of an accredited investor to vouch for you in that case. And so you can't begin raising money without any of that in place. So meaning you've got a budget, it's all gone through, and all the legalities are in place. Now, this is why crowdfunding is the most amazing thing that exists, because that document, that private placement memorandum, you're going to spend $30,000 before you ever, have a cent. Like, you need money to make a movie, and you're like, I don't have money, and this is going to cost you. And so it's so costly. So crowdfunding is really, it's ingenious because it's a way of introducing the non-profit, which, doc people have experienced much more the nonprofit world, and I've experienced that in the theater realm where it's all not-for-profit. But for the narrative world now, it's like crowdfunding is sort of like really trying to find a way to like introduce the not-for-profit world into narrative, into the big business world to sort of equal the playing field. And I'll give you a great example of the story. I have a friend who's a filmmaker who had he had the rights to a book. It was a book called Blue Like Jazz, and he had the rights to this book, which was a New York Times best-selling book. All right, and they had a good package together and had credible actors and different things like that. And they were out there trying, but the names weren't just big enough. They didn't quite work, et cetera, et cetera. They didn't know. They're like, oh, you need a bigger name. You need this and that and the other. And so they got frustrated and said, well, we got this book, and this has value, and there's a fan base, and Indiegogos and Kickstarters now exist, so we're going to go to them. So they started a Kickstarter campaign, and it's one of the most successful Kickstarter campaigns. They took that, went to the people, and they raised $325,000, right, on Kickstarter to do this feature, right? Now, the package was already a decent package. It just wasn't enough for like the Lionsgates and the Sonys and et cetera, et cetera. They needed bigger names. So now they got $325,000. Well, guess what? That $325,000, while you're raising that, you've also done a marketing campaign, right? So you've generated all this excitement. They want to see it happen. So now you make the movie, and guess what? You don't owe anybody back that money. It's like a not-for-profit. right? In that you don't know that. So now they went to roadside attractions and went to everybody and said, hey, look, we made the movie. It was like making a $325,000, that money became zero. Guess what? An offer that they couldn't refuse. And so the need for the big names became neutralized and was no longer an issue because they didn't have to spend, I mean, they still got to do the marketing and all that, but they don't have to cover that $325,000 budget. And the film was out there, limited theatrical release. It's on DVD now. It's out there. And so it's a great and so if you work it, it's pretty impressive what you can do now.
Or you could just use it to raise the money to go get the lawyers to make that document for you.
Yeah.
True, you can.
No, but here's the thing about crowdfunding, and with the Jobs Act that just passed, okay, and then it'll go into effect next year. The Kickstarter now, that's all charity. That's why you're able to go out there and get that money, because people aren't getting a return on that money. And now where crowdfunding, the Jobs Act is going to change that, is that less, unsophisticated investors, okay, people who make under $100,000, will be able to invest up to $2,000, and you'll be able to advertise on the internet and say, hey, this is our movie, invest in it. Whereas you can't do that now because that's considered like, an equity, okay?
Right.
You'd be like a boiler room fake stock guy,
Right.
and you'd be scamming grandma for $2,000, right? So that's really the main difference, and I think you're going to see independent film change significantly next year, probably more to 2014, because a lot of films will be able to be made for $1 million because you'll be able to grow an audience, and you'll be able to get your friends who maybe they don't want to give you 10,000, but maybe they'll give you 500. And maybe you'll be able to, and now you'll be able to get 5,000 or 500 people to invest, whereas a PPM is for documents where you can go out to private investors and legally, people that are your friends, and legally get money from them. But if you're going to actually advertise or solicit money from strangers, that's why you need the PPM. And and if it's anything beyond 35 people, generally that's when
Right.
the PPM kicks in, okay? But if you just go to 4 or 5 friends, and maybe one of your friends is really rich and some other of your friends doing well on Wall Street or something, you don't need that document. You can raise the money yourself. But I'm really excited about the Jobs Act next year because people like me will be able to. There's still going to be some costs and some legal things that need to be worked out. But instead of having that $30,000 leap of document to get over, it'll be more like 5,000. And I'll be able to do that for you instead of having to go to some giant financial law firm that does Wall Street deals and big stock deals and have them do that for you. And it'll be better because there's so many films that are in the $200,000 range, and they're trying to go out and raise money, and that hurdle's just too high to do it legally. And I think this would probably be the best thing for independent film in the last 15, 20 years. I'm really excited about it.
Totally.
I just want to go back to the music issue real quick. Isn't there some royalty-free websites where you can use music off of those to put into your films?
Yeah.
But-
Does it iTunes or?
No,
Apple?
definitely read in those. Many of those you can get those, and they call them royalty free
Yeah.
for personal use, and that's hidden within all of the jargon that you never read. You just say accept. You've just passed by a bunch of stuff that said you can only use this for personal use. And there are things out there that you can totally get for free, and there's many music libraries. But since I do a lot of corporate videos, I'll be sharing one of these sites with a client, and they'll go through and say, oh, this is $169 for us to use this piece of music for a year or for 10 years or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but that's $169 for each time it's used, and it's for in-house corporate use. Now this is for commercial, and then even while it was free or cheap the first time, now every time it gets a new a 13-week broadcast flight, you owe another $6,000 instead of $169.
Royalty-free isn't exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes
It's
it
a
is, though. I mean,
catch.
there's a needle drop studio or something. I can't remember what it's even called. It's been such a long time since I've used it. But at GBH, people used to make documentaries all the time back in the records day, where they would actually literally find a piece, and it was public domain. I don't know
Yeah, so
how,
they're
how
out there
great the
just watching.
quality is.
Like iTunes or somebody had like a large database
There's stuff out there.
Demand on what you were saying, where, it's free until you start.
Right. Yeah, just look, just research it a little bit. Don't just go by the banner masthead.
Right?
Excuse me, I don't have much of a voice at the moment, but my question is regarding budgets. I've heard a couple of figures thrown around 200, 300,000. My question is, what does that, excuse me, is that from pre-production? I mean, is that development, pre-production, production, post-production, marketing, distribution? Can you actually do that for 200-300 grand?
Bear.
Depends on the show.
Yeah.
Does anyone say yes? Just want to do a little.
Yeah.
survey. Anyone say yes?
What, the marketing for all that?
Yeah, but who are you marketing to?
I'd say no. I'd
Well,
say
yeah,
no.
well-
No way. You have
Yeah,
to at
true.
least. How much is pre-production?
Which begs the question, what is the goal of the person doing the production, right?
Right.
Are you talking theatrical, limited theater, or are you just somebody going, getting the minimum number of screens they need to get to be Academy Club? I mean, it does seem that that's kind of the first question, isn't it? What's the goal, what's the budget?
Right.
But the classic filmmaker's dream, I don't even know if this is realistic to talk about, but I'll do it anyway. Let's say that somebody had the dream of, they're gonna raise 200 or 300 grand. They're gonna make a feature. Maybe they'll get some names that, your point, Aaron, that you may not have heard of recently or may not be marquee names, but nonetheless, they're real actors. They're SAG members, etc. And your intention is to make that film, get some kind of limited theatrical, get into some real festivals, and be in contention potentially. I don't think it's unrealistic to say this film is going to be good enough that it actually could be in contention for real awards at real festivals. I don't mean real, but I mean like significant festivals.
Yep.
And to say then that 200 or 300 grand is going to be able to deliver the classic filmmaker's dream of doing all that and then getting picked up for distribution, and then where the filmmakers are holding on to the rights, or they are going to get some kind of royalty stream in perpetuity. I mean, isn't that? I mean, that's like the '90s classic dream. But is that even anything anybody's thinking about realistically when throwing out a number like 200 or 300?
No.
Okay.
It's really not if you want a distributor to talk to you,
Yeah.
right? And even if you did a $300,000 film that a distributor picked up, when they buy it from you, they're going to say you're getting nothing from this. You'll get your money back, but even if that movie goes on to be Paranormal Activity 3, you're not getting a percentage of the $30 million. They're just going to give you a buyout rate, and that's it. You'll get a shot at another film, but you're not going to get rich off that. And really, the number is today. When I said 200,000-300,000, that was to get it in the can. All right, I'm not talking about going to festivals and sales and marketing, and that was really just to get you noticed into a decent festival. Really, $2 million is probably the lowest budget you could do that would get interest from a distributor that is actually something they would buy and distribute.
We're talking theatrical.
Right, yeah. Because really their expenses are $20 million to get in, if it's something that's going to get into 3,000 screens, you're looking at, $20 million.
Let's
Yeah.
scale that down to instead of 2,000.
Well, say 50 screens.
Okay.
Now you're still looking at a couple $1 million of advertising. Even more than just as much, if not more, than the film.
Yeah. And one of the things that the reality about the distribution game is, I guess several friends who got films. It is not uncommon that you'll take something and you'll get picked up for $50,000. Big distributors paying. I mean, there are people like Sony Classics out there picking up films for $50,000. All right.
From that point on,
Oh,
100%.
They have you over the barrel.
yeah, because beggars can't be choosers, and you're sort of stuck there. I mean, it's the difficulty of the film and escalating is here's the deal is like, and the myth of like price and how much it costs, et cetera. So like, let's say, okay, so we did something crazy and we made a film for $20,000, right? 10 days. It's like, realistically, when it's all said and done, before that film ever sees the light of day at a theater, for instance, in a movie theater, if it ever went to a screen, right? And forget like 50 screen. You're not 50 screens. Maybe you're opening on 2 in New York and 1 in LA. You're opening 3, and you're doing day and date releases. So it's coming out in the theater same time as it's coming out on VOD, right? Like the independent filmmakers that are getting these deals. But before it's all said and done, if you made it for 20, all of a sudden they're going to guarantee before it's released theatrical, it's going to sit on a stage. We're going to double, triple our budget before this thing ever even saw, all automatically just putting it on a stage for a proper sound mix. All of a sudden, it'll easily you could plan on $50,000 being dumped into that before it saw the light of day, sound-wise. There are also these little things, so you want a Dolby certificate. These are prices that you never know as well. You're not going to play in a theater without getting a Dolby certificate, which in my opinion is like one of the biggest rackets in the business and everything, because the guy's going to sit here and he's going to sit in a room, with the Dolby thing to make sure it sounds okay, and then he's going to stamp a certificate, and you're going to pay $9,000. That's a price you don't know. You're going to pay for your to get your clearance report before it's all said and done. Somebody's going to spend about $1,000 on your clearance report. Right? These things are going to continue to escalate. And then you're going to realize that it's like, oh, you made a film for $20,000, but the reason you did that is because everybody got deferred payments, right? So really, we made a film for $20,000, but really, as far as what we gave and the clientele and who we are, no, we made a film for $250,000. We made a $250,000 film, right? And then this is all going to add, and they're going to look at these deferments, and it's just, it balloons. So really, that number, 250,000 is the reality in terms of getting it in the can and getting certain things that you can get finished. I mean, it's complicated and it escalates, but I sold my first feature. I sold it. I got picked up. I got acquired. I got a paycheck, for it. I'm not going to disclose the number, but it was not a lot. I was released in 12 theaters theatrically. I was in New York. I was in Seattle. I was in Denver, San Jose, blah, 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 right? Did that, got VOD. I've sold international territories. I made that first film in, 2006. I just sold Hungary just the other day for how much? How much are international territories selling? Oh, the entire country of Hungary, I think the final number came like $3,000, right? They're not paying huge numbers. It's like $3,000 and it's all over in Hungary. It's like the numbers games and distribution is absolutely crazy. Well, no, because we still owe people. so I mean, but theoretically, yeah.
Your film is like when I talk to people about my dream, your film is the one I use to burst the bubble with, because you had a great film with a great actor. You actually got picked up.
Right.
You got distributed. Wow, the dream. But actually, that's not quite the way it works out.
Wasn't a financial dream. Yeah.
But it's critically,
But artistically, yes.
Right? But that is a test case. Coming in New Hampshire Film Festival for now 6-7 years. That's the one that I look at to go, gosh, I imagine that was like a dream come true. It was your first feature.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was the dream. But yet, here you are still owing people money.
Mm-hmm.
So you've taken a different approach, a very different approach.
Well, technically, I really don't owe anybody. Thankful to that very nice $30,000 document called the Private Placement Memorandum. But, yeah.
So, I mean, people who invested money with an expectation of return.
Yeah,
Investors.
exactly.
Maybe they were angel investors, so maybe that's fine. They're like patrons.
Yeah, and some people get it.
Yeah.
Some people realize that you may lose your mind. I mean, the majority of films. Here's the reality. 10% of all films made, this is the rough number out there, 10% of all films made receive distribution. 10% of all that are made. Now, an even scarier number, 10% of those 10% that got acquired for distribution ever make a second film, a second feature film, right? So getting it out there, getting it distributed it's crazy. Like you can go, I got tons of friends who have all been to Sundance. You've never seen their films, but that's the dream, right? Got into Sundance, went to Sundance, which is great, and you can always have that little laurel, and I'll say Sundance, but you've never seen their films because they never saw the light of day in distribution. Only the belle of the ball that we all read about in the trades that got there.
Yep.
Sundance doesn't mean you got distribution or, you know.
One quick follow-up, and I'll sit down.
Yep.
But the question is, so what's different about this film in terms of your strategy? Now, there are, I'm not good at counting, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people on this stage. And 3 of them, at least, were involved in this particular production. So we've got a wealth of experience in terms of talking about a test case scenario.
Right.
This one film. So my question is, what's the business strategy? What's the distribution strategy? What's the expectation regarding return on investment?
The hope, yeah, no, the hope is to go to, the hope is to go to Sundance and get it noticed, all right? And, the big market festivals in the world are Sundance, Cannes, Toronto, Venice, Berlin, those are really where big markets are. There are smaller markets. Rotterdam has a pretty decent market in the Netherlands. San Sebastian has a small little market in Spain. I've been there. So to try to get into a market festival, South by Southwest is doing, their sales coming out of there now. So get it into a festival that has a decent marketplace to try to sell it, get a pickup deal. Now for us, because we went through Indiegogo, it's great. So any money that comes through this just begins to pay everybody who worked on it. So whether it's, even if it's just $35,000, all of a sudden that comes to us, pari passu. Is that,
I think so.
Yeah.
So it becomes to come back. And what we want to do is we want to get it picked up. The ideal is to get it, in the theaters, to get it on DVD, to get it on VOD, to get it out there. But ultimately, this is a project where I'm thankful for us. We wanted to continue to be a proof of concept that will. I'm a big believer, and I believe most of these people are, is that work begets work. All right. And the problem for being a small, in the current marketplace, especially in the current economy, for being a small independent filmmaker, you are stuck and you are beholden to this huge dollar. So you're sat there waiting forever, right? I've been spending 3 years with it, like I talked about that project before, waiting with this good cast, this, that, but it's not big enough. And so then all of a sudden you go to this financier and it's like, no. Well, if you guys could get Don Cheadle and maybe Robin Wright in there as well, that's going to make, and you're waiting. But because it's become such big business in our country, right? America, it's our second largest export in this country, movies. It's arms and then movies, right? So it doesn't get any bigger business than this. But you get stuck and you're beholden to where, but it's an art form. It's an art form, right? If I want to go write a book, I can sit down with my pen and paper and I can write a book. If I want to paint, I go get my supplies and I can make a painting. If I want to do a play, I can, rent a little space, put together some actors, I can do it. But film, oh, no. Now we've just relegated it to the bottom feeders of big business. So at the end of the day, ultimately, for me, the strategy was let's create something and let's make something. And even my attorney out in LA, et cetera, and she knows, and she deals with the big players every day. She's like, you've got to make something because you're an artist. And either way, she's like, you won't regret that. Even if you don't, because the market is, nobody can really predict it. They do the best they can and they come up with these, programs and whatnot within the studios and the financings called ultimates, and they try to predict as much as possible and turn it into a science. But you have to make something, and you need a strategy, and so everybody knows it's easy to research. It's like these festivals would do great, would be fantastic. But for instance, my first film didn't get the Sundance premiere or the Toronto premiere, but my film got acquired by a distributor. It got picked up, it got out there, and it didn't need all that. And I had other friends who went to Sundance, and their film has never been around the world, and nobody's seen it.
Right, but let's not make the people too sad. Let's think.
No,
I know. We'll do a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up. Go ahead.
I don't know if this is actually a question or just an observation. My entry into film, cinema, and TV has been completely opposite of what most people do. Most people go to film school and try and get into production. I started out working at a movie theater. Eventually, I spent 6 years working at different movie theaters around New England. Eventually, projectionist management, and I got that perspective from the exhibition standpoint. And I firsthand watched the transition from 35 millimeter projectors now to all digital in the next few years.
hard drive that like a local school produced and put it into the projector at a major, won't name the chain, but 470 seat auditorium. This was never possible. You couldn't take something that somebody shot on hand cam a few years ago and put it on a 35 millimeter projector. Is that anything that is on the radar, like new distribution methods?
Well, I don't know about new distribution methods, but that little bit of what you just talked about. So a hard drive that you can buy for maybe $200 was just sent to XYZ Theater. Previously, it was, all right, we have to get them a film print that costs us $2,000 for that print, which is going to wear out. So if you want to release in 3,000 theaters, you're talking 3,000 times, times 2,000, and you're just escalating way up. Or you're talking the hard drive route, and you're sending those out, or they're downloading them at no cost at all to you.
Well, the other thing too, and this is over the past few years, you don't need a hard drive anymore.
Right.
By satellite. So
Yeah.
literally just, there's no cost involved in that distribution. But what the hang up is, are these deals that the theaters have with the distributors that have with the studios. So from my perspective, that's kind of
Right.
getting into this, you were talking about what the ideal situation is. Is that on anybody's radar?
Well, what I think you're saying is what's happening is it's monopolization, right? So we're having 16 megaplex theaters, but 14, 15 of the films are all from 4 or 5 studios.
And I think there may be a distribution panel. Is Dan still here? No, I think, is there a distribution panel?
Yes, tomorrow.
Yeah, so you might want to check that out. Go into it some more.
That's called the teaser.
Okay.
And there's a music panel on Sunday.
And there's a music panel on Sunday. All right, we'll do one more from that lady.
This might be a general question, but
Yep.
given each your experience from a personal standpoint, what advice would you give today's New Hampshire film students that are about to graduate from college and looking for something beyond the unpaid internship
Mhm.
because now they have to financially support themselves and can't necessarily afford their own project.
Right.
But
So wise words of wisdom.
Where are you getting a paid internship? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
I need that.
I think we all have, let's be nice and end on some hopeful, inspiring tidbit of advice, and we can probably
What are you
all
looking
go
at?
down that. I'm going to make you go first in case you bum people out.
Oh, this
I'll
would be awesome.
recover.
I can start down here.
Yeah,
and then
okay.
we can just-
I'll get real happy at the end. Go ahead. Briefly.
I think hard work and research and just making the most of every opportunity and being intelligent, making intelligent choices, being smart about the people. Here's what's most important, actually. Being smart about the people you surround yourself with. Because in this business, everybody talks as if they know. Everybody. And you go to LA, everybody's got a screenplay. Your mailman has a screenplay.
Right.
And you need to surround yourself with people who will give you honest advice, who will tell you the hard things, but also encourage you and support you, and who know what they're doing, right? That guidance is really important. And then know and have a plan for what you're going to do. And I'll I'll break this down in terms of looking for real world job and everything like that, money. For me, I wanted to be a feature film director. All right? Being a feature film director meant that I bypassed being a hot commercial director, doing commercials. Or it meant bypassed being a writer in a story room, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And here's the reason why. And this is the reason why, is the majority, I have tons and tons and tons and tons of friends who are the biggest commercial directors in the world, right? Who want to make features. And guess what? The industry says to them that they're a commercial director and they're labeled, you're doing commercials. I got friends who are assistant directors working for big studio things, right?
We got to wrap it up.
And
my
then,
friend.
okay, but my point in all that, and the reason that I'm making this is very, very important, is you don't realize how they lock you into a box, and they pigeonhole you. And so the more clear you are about what you want to do, then you can take the right steps in getting there. And that's what you want, is you want to achieve your goal and you achieve your dream. And that's important,
I agree.
you know?
I think the most important thing that I've learned over the years, okay, was your boss is going to be the most important person to your growth. You could have a terrible boss or you could have a great boss, but you have to find a boss who you know who promotes. And you have to be dedicated and you have to be willing to work for 3 to 5 to 6 years in terrible positions that are underpaid and extremely long hours. And then you will work your way up. There are no shortcuts, especially in film. There's no middle management. Okay, it's all relationships, and it's all just dealing with the grind, and sucking it up, and 5, 6, 7 years from now, then you'll eventually move up to manager, director, you know, creative, executive, and so on. And it's your friends who are going to be your best allies. As they move up, you'll move up with them, and stay close to your friends who are in the industry, and you'll grow with them. And your mentors who are going to help pull you up through the industry are also going to be your greatest allies. But your greatest asset right now is your youth, because you're actually the market that most of the films are being, you know, distributed to, and you're at an age where you're the people who are buying the films. I mean, a 12-year-old girl is the most powerful person in the film industry, because that's who we're all making movies for. So the guys who are calling the shots in their 50s and 60s, they don't know anymore. They don't know. They want you to tell them. So that's your biggest asset.
Thank you. Jessica?
I don't come from a filmmaker's background, but I can tell you that what both Matthew and Aaron have said about surrounding yourself with the right people, getting a really good mentor, whether that's a boss or someone that you just work with on projects on the side, I think is very important. I would say that and this goes against a little bit what Aaron was saying, be open to things that maybe you don't think that you want to do, because you might find that you actually really like producing documentaries instead of feature films. There are a lot, I don't know if you want to stay in New Hampshire, but I know in the Boston area there's a ton of small producers who do a variety of projects, and you know, you might have to start as an intern, an unpaid intern, and you know, work at the mall or waitress, but that, unfortunately, that is the industry that we all live in and work in. So, but eventually, with hard work and the right people around you, you will get to where you want to be.
Thank you.
Yeah, and on the whole thing, it is about the people that you're surrounded by, but finding those people is the big challenge. And coming to festivals is, you know, one of the best ways to find like-minded individuals. But the bigger thing is, then you need to find people that complement your work, what you do. I know I'm good at these things. I'm horrible at paperwork, so I got to find somebody that's good with paperwork. I can do camera stuff all right, but I got to find somebody that's better at camera stuff than I am. So finding these people that you can get along with, that you can tell them how much their idea sucks and still like talking to them 10, 20 minutes later, or a day, depending on how bad it really sucked. Going through and finding just these really good partnerships, and it's not just usually one person. I mean, I was lucky enough, 5 years ago, to be on a panel, and then somebody in the back of the room started saying, I do this, and now we've been producing things for the last seven years.
I stalked him.
Yeah, but it was, you know, when we met, it was like, oh, wait, we really do complement each other well, and then she knew these other people that complimented her in other ways, and I had all this other group, and okay, you can start to get a little cliquey at times, but then you need to expand yourself and go, all right, we're getting too cliquey because we're always working with the same people. Why don't we start working with some guy from Keene, and maybe that'll grow us as individuals, and I know we've all grown from that.
Thank you.
I agree with everything they've said. I think that I would add to that, be yourself. Figure out who you are. That would really help a lot. I see a lot of filmmaker wannabes, and I agree with what Jessica said, that sort of be open to something else. Like, you might find that you do like documentary versus feature. You might find that what you really like is sort of the management of the whole thing, or you might like the interviewing, and that might lead to radio, or you might, you know, you don't know what you want. Is it the stories that you love? Is it the idea of the glamour that you're looking for? Forget it. I think we've made that all pretty clear. What is it that you like? And I don't think it's an obvious thing for people to know who they are and what they love. I just don't think that's obvious at all. And I think that's part of the challenge of growing up, is you figure it out. And if you think you're trying to break into this industry and you know, be successful at it, you'll be most successful if you're really you.
I agree. That's a really good point. People sometimes try to be their mentors or be someone who they think they should be. When I was younger, I used to try to be that bulldog, that real hard-butted person, and I'm not that person. That's Bill. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I will actually end by 2 pieces of advice for you. 1, wear comfortable shoes, especially if you're working on my set, because that's the first thing I look at when a new PA walks in, is what their shoes look like. And second, know your craft. I know I started with that, but I want to end with that. And wrap around to the plug I was supposed to give in the beginning. Along with being a filmmaker, I'm on the board of Portsmouth Public Television Station, and we have a little table set up in back. And one of the things we are starting are seminars